to be decided in terms of rider moves. We'll come back on to that a little later on, but let's change focus and have a look at Moto2 and Moto3 briefly, and we'll come back to some more MotoGP stuff to round things off. In Moto2, it was Remy Gardner who took victory ahead of Marco Bezzecchi. Gardner, though, under a lot of pressure from Bezzecchi. It's his fourth win of the season. Closest championship rival, Ralf Fernandez, was no points this weekend round. He fell off and actually perhaps suffered a bit of injury there as well, which hopefully Pete will be able to give us an update on in a minute. But Keith, Gardner again with another win. It looked like Bezzecchi maybe went for the wrong tyre choice there, which perhaps was the ultimate nail in his coffin to try and secure the win.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that was, at the end of the day, Remy Gardner is quality at the moment. I mean, who would have betted it 2 years ago? Remy, he had potential, but it didn't seem like it was going to arrive. And all of a sudden, this year he's just looked quality throughout, hasn't he? I mean, he is just the class act. A little bit disappointed for Sam Lowe. Sam Lowe's looked like he got the performance to make the podium over the weekend, but it just didn't happen on the day when it counts, of course. So Sam finishing fourth, he'll be gutted with that, I would think, because he looked potentially like a race winner, certainly a podium. Bezzecchi, again, you can't really tell because his performance this year hasn't really been where he would want it to be. So, Silverstone was looking like he might. He popped that one in qualifying. You went, oh, hang on a second. He looks like he's going to be one of the men to challenge. But I just think Gardner is class at the moment. He looks so in control of the whole thing. I mean, it was a fairly dull Moto2 race. MotoGP was dull, I thought, personally. Moto3 was the class again of the weekend. Maybe they should put Moto3 on as the last race of the day because it's always incredibly good from a spectator point of view and from a fun and games point of view. There you go, Dorna. Moto3 last, please.
A new format change. But it was a shame for Sam Lowe in fourth. He got pipped by Jorge Navarro. But Ralf Fernandez fell off his bike, didn't he, Pete? Have we got an update on that? Because it did look like it was a bit of a hefty whack.
Yeah, nothing official from the team. So I think we did see initially they sort of waved over for a stretcher, didn't they? And then he sort of got up onto his feet and walked away. So fingers crossed there's nothing sort of permanent there, should we say, serious there. Big win for Gardner, wasn't it? And, Fernandez is now, I think, only 8 points ahead of Bezzecchi in the championship. So he's now, his attention almost from trying to catch Gardner. He's also got to keep one eye on Bezzecchi closing in on him for second now. So, yeah, I mean, he was, he was slamming the haters 2 weeks ago or whatever. I mean, I hope he's not looking at his social media too much now because...
Yeah, I wouldn't advise it, but Remy Gardner now with a 44-point lead. Also coming into the weekend, it was announced that Triumph have extended their engine deal with Moto2 coming on to them. Moto2 signing a 3-year extension to continue. That's the Triumph 765cc. Good news for Triumph and Moto2.
Yeah, absolutely good news for them. I mean, it was a bit ironic that we saw Marcel Schrotter rolling around with a smoky one. But it wasn't actually smoky, was it? It was water in the end that was coming out of him. Someone had undone a water pipe on it. But it kind of, I don't know why it made me smile. Again, it's one of those situations, and they make the announcement, and then next thing we're focused on television on a Triumph that's smoking. But it wasn't the motor. To be fair, it wasn't the motor. It was a water leak. And he got a long lap penalty for not taking any notice of the meatball flag, the orange and the black flag. He should have pulled off immediately, and he didn't, which I can't believe a rider of his stature didn't do that. But yeah, good for Triumph, good for the sport. I mean, when Triumph came on board with the 765, it's such a major upgrade for the Grand Prix series in that it moved the middleweight class, if you like, closer to MotoGP and further away from Moto3. More electronics, more mid-range torque, so much more in a technical point over what were the Hondas. Honda motors, unburstable, did a great job, filled the gap for a great number of years. And when Dorna couldn't find any other engine manufacturer to come on board, Honda carried on bridging the gap, if you like, on out of date across the frame 4-cylinder 600s. But as soon as we got the 765 triple in there, looked good, sounds good. I mean, it sounds like the right motorbike on the track as well. About a howling pack of 765s. It's to behold. It's been good for Triumph. I mean, I always have to admit. I always have to admire, a manufacturer that's about to put their name to the testing of their product to a bunch of bloody hooligans on a Grand Prix track that are over-revving them on the upshifts, downshifts, and any other shift you like. It's a big deal when you. I would think there were a few people at Triumph that probably held their breath for a few rounds early on in that, but it's proved to be and proved good for Triumph, good for the sport, and a great liaison that Dorna have managed to piece together. Brilliant.
And I think also maybe credit to Externpro, the company that sort of prepares the engines, and so Triumph provide them, don't they, Keith? And then it's up to them to really make sure the power, the performance is the same across the board.
Do you know what? Really good point. I'm so pleased that you picked that up, and I bloody completely overlooked Trevor Morris and the mob at Aragon on the Aragon Tech Park. They're based just outside the Aragon circuit, and Trevor Morris and his car. I've known Trevor all my racing life, effectively, and they do a great job. They refresh. Basically, Triumph, they hand over the product, and that's it. They are the providers of the units, and Externpro basically do all the stuff to keep the things refreshed and keep the motors equal, to keep that stability through the year. So, yeah, good shout, Pete. Good shout.
Well, perhaps it was a slightly a duller affair from MotoGP and Moto2 this weekend, but Moto3 certainly proved once again perhaps to be the class of the weekend. It was Fenati who eased to a win almost ahead of Niccolo Antonelli. But interesting, championship leaders Pedro Costa and Sergio Garcia, poor qualifying kind of cemented a bit of a hard-fought race for both of those. Keith, your thoughts on Moto3 this weekend?
Acosta and Garcia, who cares? Like at the end of, if you're going to have a bad day, you might as well both have it together when the championship comes. So the pair of them were down the field a bit. But Romano Fenati, I've always loved Romano Fenati.
Oh yeah,
I know he's crossed the line a couple of times, and he has suffered badly for his indiscretions. But the bloke can ride a motorbike. I mean, like every session he went out, he was fastest. And he was fastest on his own, not waiting for other people, not waiting for a slipstream. And I mean, you can get some pretty mighty slipstreams at Silverstone if you hang around. You can gain half a second, maybe even a second a lap if you get two really good drafts. But no, not Fenati. He does it his own way. And the performance, I mean, qualifying was remarkable. He hadn't got a lap until the very last lap of qualifying, until he went under the checkered flag to set that pole position. I mean, he had was it Fellon that was behind him who fell off, actually. So Fellon was stuck in behind, and Fenati had got completely miffed by people that were waiting for him. When everyone in pit lane was waiting for Fenati to go down pit lane to come out onto the track so they could draft him and try and use Fenati, but he weren't having any of it. Came back into pit lane, arms around, waving, looking about, well and truly, I thought his head would go. I thought he's just going to blow this completely. He's going to start mid-grid when he's been the fastest man out there all week so far. And sure enough, the last lap, Fellon came round behind him and he looked round at Fellon and he could see he was didn't want anybody to follow him, even Fellon, who was never going to be able to keep with him anyway. And then Fellon fell off, as I said, and Fenati had the lap to himself and absolutely blew him away. I mean, set that pole position. And if you go back to the time, bloody back at, I think it was Misano, wasn't it, where he grabbed a handful of Manzi's bloody front brake because he was pissed off and frustrated with Manzi, got himself, people on Twitter, I do love Twitter, except on this occasion, where they were accusing him of attempted murder. I always remember that one that came out, someone accused him of attempted murder. He should be done for attempted murder. It went completely off the scale. The fact of the matter is, if we go back to that time, if I might just waste a bit more time here on Crash with this subject, he grabbed his front brake and it was so wrong, because it could have gone so wrong. But all of us, through our years of mucking about on trail bikes, on motocrossers, even on bloody road race bikes, you go past your mate and you flick their ignition off if they've got an ignition key, if it's a production bike. You grab their front brake, you smack them on the arse, you twang their bloody handlebars or something. It's kind of, I know it shouldn't be at Grand Prix level and you shouldn't do it, and I'm not condoning it at all, but these are the kind of antics that when someone either cheeses you off or you're having a bit of fun with them, you do it. It's what it is. So attempted murder, of course it wasn't attempted murder. It was a bit of frustration, and he grabbed Manzi's front brake. He grabbed it a bit hard, I've got to say. So he absolutely deserved his ban and absolutely deserved what he got. But attempted murder, it definitely wasn't. And then there was a time when he threw the remote control at was it Nieto or something? Who threw it at
one of the VR46 team, yeah.
And the VR46 team, and he got himself slung out of the VR46 team prior to a racing weekend. I mean, it was so serious that they chucked him out of that. He's a hothead, and he looks like a bloody hothead. He looks like that little short bloke that you wouldn't fight with anywhere because he just looks like he's going to have a go. And that is Fenati, and he's got a way of riding a motorbike as well. You watch him. He loves a wide line. He'll ride round the outside like he's riding a berm in a motocross situation. And we're all sort of ex-motorbikes, current motorbike racers, all looking at him thinking, yeah, how's he finding that grip? How's he going that quick? He's got his own way. I hope that he is a late bloomer, and I hope that he moves on into greater things, because I think Romano Fenati has got something about him, and it is a little bit special. I just hope it isn't mired in the kind of Gobert way, if you like, where your talent implodes into some kind of disaster area like Anthony Gobert's did. If you go back that far, I mean, we still think about Gobert and the talent he's got and how he completely blew it. Let's hope it's not the same for the likes of Romano Fenati, because it was a great ride. It was a great ride, great qualifying, great ride, fully deserved. He's back on the map, and for me, it was the ride of the weekend, bar none.
Well, attempted murder or not, certainly ride of the weekend. Actually, just off topic, I think you'll like this. When I worked on a touring car, four wheels, a touring car race a few weekends ago. And there was
barely four wheels if you're talking touring cars.
But there was a slight translation error in the race control notes afterwards. So one of the drivers was penalised, and it said, driver penalised for life imprisonment for a false start. And I thought, God, they really upped the ante on these penalties now. God, talk about
Sounds like the kind of consistency we got in MotoGP.
Yeah. Exactly. But it was an absolute domination in the end from Fenati. Let's talk, of course, about John McPhee, because it was the British Grand Prix. Enjoyed a bit of a miserable weekend, qualified 15th, found himself last after the first few corners, was able to fight back with a couple of really good moves to 11th in the end, but then demoted for track limits violations. But just another trying weekend for John McPhee, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was trying before we got there. Because in my view, and in a lot of the populist view, would have been that he should have been in the MotoGP ride rather than Adam Norridin, Moto2 ride rather than Adam Norridin. Adam Norridin got brought in to take Jake Dixon's ride because Jake Dixon took the Morbidelli ride over at Petronas. So I was disappointed because I think it would have been a good show for him, and it would have been a great opportunity for John to show us what he can do on a Moto2 bike at a home Grand Prix. And I think that would have been important for him career-wise. So I haven't spoken to John at the weekend, so I don't know what his exact feelings were, but that's my feelings. He should have gone to Moto2. They should have let him ride the Moto2 bike. Moto3, he's not in the championship in any way, shape or form. It would have cost him nothing, really. Great ride through to up to 10th place at one point from stone last, having got shoved out early on. Really, really good ride. He's a tricky one, isn't he? He's been around long enough now, John, but you can't discount him from being a Moto3 winner. Fairly soon, he's going to reach the age, 28 it is, where you are not allowed to ride in Moto3 anymore. There's an upper age limit in Moto3. It's 50 in the other classes. It's 28 in Moto3. So it's going to make a difference. I think he needed that ride in Moto2. He needed to show them, a Moto2 ride. Having said that, what I've just said, for all I know, Jonathan, he could have knocked it back. He could have actually not wanted to ride the Moto2 bike. I don't know what the politics were in the team. I haven't spoken to anybody in the team this week. So it's one of those situations where maybe John didn't want to ride the Moto2 ride, even though we all think he should have, for what it's worth.
And we should say, we don't know what's happening for Aragon yet, do we? The one thing we do know is that Cal will still be on the monster bike. He did confirm that on Sunday evening at Silverstone. So Cal is staying on for another race because he only signed up for 3 initially. So Silverstone was the last race. So he's going to do another race, and that fits in with where Morbidelli was hoping to come back from Misano. So that kind of fits in there. But we don't know, will Jake get another chance? It looks like, he certainly made clear he would like one, but will he be on that bike again? Will they put someone else? As Keith said, will they decide to give... You might say, if they're thinking of Darryn Binder or Jake for next year, maybe they should put Darryn on there, but I don't think they will because he's got his best chance. But that ride is still unclear. Just to sort of say, as of Monday, who they're going to put on it for the next event. Certainly, if Jake knew he wasn't giving anything away, he said, "Look, it was pretty last minute for Silverstone. I think it'll be a last minute decision for Aragon as well."
Tell you what, Darryn Binder's under threat at the moment because Jake Dixon can ride a big bike. We know that straight away. He's more of a big bike man than Darryn Binder has been. And Darryn Binder's rumoured ride to jump from Moto3 straight into MotoGP might be in difficulty. Jake Dixon basically headed John McPhee off from the Moto2 ride when it was in his contract to be riding the Moto2 bike. And Jake Dixon, because they wanted to keep him, kept him in that slot. So McPhee ended up staying in Moto3. And it could be Dixon who mires the rumoured jump from Moto3 to MotoGP for Darryn Binder. Call him Darryn Dixon if you like. He's best of both worlds.
I think it's interesting. Harry brought it up last week that it was an audition, wasn't it? Even though on paper it was just a one-off ride. In front of your home fans, make the most of it. But
it never is a one-off ride.
And in fairness to Jake, we spoke about Aprilia last year. All those Moto2 guys that turned down a bike that has now finished on the podium in MotoGP. Jake took the risk, didn't he? You said yourself, Keith, how everything was stacked against him. No testing, only 60 laps before doing a race. So much could have gone wrong. But I think there's no doubt Jake Dixon is a lot closer to being a full-time MotoGP rider than he was before this weekend.
Absolute great statement, Pete. I'm bang on with you on that one. I really believe that. I think that Jake, we know what. Sometimes it's easy to forget, isn't it? Because we live in the moment with this with all motorbike racing, with any racing actually, any sport perhaps. He was a good superbike rider. He was a very good superbike rider. He rides a big bike well, and we know that. And that's now Darryn Binder's problem. He hasn't shown that proof. And I think that this new team that is a completely new team. The Petronas team finishes at the end of this year. It's a brand new team next year. Brand new sponsors. Might have the same personnel, but the split is fairly succinct, isn't it? It's a fairly major split. So their thinking will be. We need a guy that's going to do the business. They're not going to take a risk.
What is it with brothers and MotoGP and motorbike racing? What is it like? I mean, I'm all for There's a lot. Obviously, it's in the family, but in MotoGP and motorcycle racing, there's a fair few families involved, aren't there?
Oh, I mean, you can go through a bloody list of them. I'm sure that if you want to have a look at it, you only got to look at British Championships. You've got the Irwins, you've got the Dunlops, you've got the, move your way through. It's I love all of that. I think it's died in the wool, Harry. It's kind of like your family, your parents, your uncles, your aunts they're all pretty much in it. They're all part of it.
Well,
I didn't mention the Lavertys there, did I? I remember when I remember the coach of Lavertys that turned up at Alton Park once for a British Championship one. There you got all of the Laverty brothers, Mick, the dad, everybody all turned up. It's like, better not say anything bad about a Laverty this week.
Well, we've got the Espargaro brothers, we've got the Marquez brothers. It's looking less likely now, maybe the Binder brothers, but never say never. Things change so quickly in MotoGP and in Moto3. The championship lead is still with Pedro Acosta, but that lead is being edged into ever so slightly. 46 points now, the gap to Garcia, and Fenati now in third with 132 points. Right, we've got a few more listener questions to chuck at you as well. First of all, from Ben Yates, what's your view on what's your view on Lowes and Dixon progressing to MotoGP, Keith? Do you see them both in the Premier class soon, or do you see one of them heading to World Superbikes instead? I know we've just covered off, obviously, Dixon, but Lowes as well.
I read that tweet.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't answer it when I saw that tweet because it's one of them questions that I hate. Because if I'm honest, Sam Lowes, we're now talking north of 30 years old. That always goes against people when you've got that logjam of talent coming up through. You've got, if you're looking at slightly older riders that they're banking on, that's where your Doviziosos come from. So it's a really, really difficult shout for a team. Sam Lowes, has he done enough to go into MotoGP again? He's certainly talented enough. There's no doubt about that. He's certainly strong enough. Will a team take a risk on him? I don't think so. Dixon, another matter of, don't think we've seen the best of Dixon yet. Maybe we hadn't seen the best of Sam Lowes yet. I mean, the Aprilia debacle didn't work at all for him. Roger Benetti's manager got him in at Aprilia. A lot of promises were made back then. I remember holding this conversation with Roger Bennett. You remember Roger Bennett, ex-500cc man, British champion, TT winner, and a very smart guy, is Sam Lowes' manager. He only manages Sam Lowes, actually, in the GP paddock. Which again might be a disadvantage if I move slightly at a tangent to this, because if you're a manager of only one rider, you're not in the mix of the massive jigsaw that's going on. Like Battistella, we were talking about earlier, Simone Battistella, who is Dovizioso's manager, among others. They understand a broader picture of what's going on in the paddock and where people are fitting in that jigsaw of manufacture of places. Whereas Roger is looking after Sam. And he's an individual manager for an individual rider. So that may be a slight disadvantage for Sam. No disrespect to Roger, because I know he's very good at what he does. But Aprilia made promises. I know that Roger did a real due diligence job on Aprilia. He went over there. He went and looked at what was going on. He questioned the right people. And still it didn't come to what it should have come to for Sam. So Sam was held back that year. And that is a problem. So I think Sam's in a more difficult position than Dixie when it comes to moving into MotoGP. I think that Jake Dixon is in a better position, particularly now his stock value, as my old mate Neil Hodgson would say, has gone up after the ride at Silverstone. Okay, the position might not have looked brilliant to those looking in from the outside, but the fact is you look at the way he went about his job. There are lots of other elements that team management teams look at. And you said it earlier, Harry. In an interview, he's like a MotoGP rider. He's got that personality that fits that bill more than many MotoGP riders. If Dixon manages to make it performance-wise, he is going to be a new Barry Sheene. There's, forget about Valentino Rossi and Marc Marquez and the rest of them. You've got a bit of a Jack the Lad here that seems like it's all easy, isn't it, geezer? Know what I mean? Yeah. And people kind of relate to that slightly common man side of sense of humour. Well, certainly I do. Anyway, maybe it's because I'm from south of the border. I don't know. But it's a situation where I think he will do British motorcycle sport a whole load of good. And, of course, in that situation, Dorna are pushing. They want a British guy that's got personality. They need this to carry on in this country. Silverstone have no state aid at all for their efforts. Silverstone could have gone bankrupt this year. The BRDC, doesn't matter what anybody says. Formula One, slight anomaly here. Why do they have 120,000 at trackside and our upper limit is 60,000? They talk about car parking or some other bull that says that they can't have more people than 60,000. They said it was a sellout for the MotoGP, but there was only 60,000 people on board, 67, I think it was. Whereas, your guys, the Formula One guys, 120,000. Why is that? I mean, what's that all about? We can't rent an extra field to park cars in. What's the snag there? I mean, I've got to ask Stuart Pringle at Silverstone why that is. He will have an absolute eloquent answer to it. Of course he will, because he's smart. Silverstone did a great job, by the way. And Monster, you mentioned Monster earlier on, Harry. Big ups to Monster. Big ups. I mean, Silverstone's the biggest site there is anywhere for a Grand Prix by acreage, and they filled it full of great stuff. Monster, really, they were the headline sponsors, absolutely kicked it out of the park. I mean, so impressive. It's the kind of atmosphere you want at a Grand Prix, particularly if you haven't been for 3 bloody years. It's, he did a fantastic. Silverstone, Monster, did a great job. Racing, okay, it wasn't quite as sparkling as we perhaps would have liked, but bloody hell, what a great event. You had to be there.
Well, very jealous we weren't, Keith, but I think you really describe it well. Sherb, who's a regular, I think, has messaged in, and this is on the Dovi news as well, coming into the weekend, of course, that he will head towards what will Petronas SRT be called, and then the Morbidelli to Yamaha and all the dominoes that are a result of that. Sherb has asked, is Dovi's return going to be on a B-spec Petronas, or will it be tricked up a bit? Surely he would want a full factory ride like Rossi spec this year. Pete, aren't there a few tricky rules around that?
So he will have to finish this season on Morbidelli's bike. So yes, for the races he does this season, he will still be on this A-spec bike. But absolutely, it looks like Dovi and his manager, very smart guys. They've said, look, if we're going to ride this bike, we'll ride the old bike, to finish the year because that's what the rules say. But it looks certainly 99% that he will get the factory spec bike next year. So yeah, he will effectively have the bike that Rossi's got at the moment. So I mean, that's great news for him. He'll be back on the Yamaha for the first time since 2012, when he had a great kind of a rebuilding year at Tectoire after leaving Repsol Honda with only one win. He then, did really well on the satellite Yamaha. Satellite Yamahas then were not like satellite Yamahas now. There was much different rules, as Keith has said. The racing's been brought a lot closer together than it was back then. But he got lots of podiums, more podiums than any other Tectoire Yamaha rider. And it got him the factory Ducati seat. So that's how he so he's got good memories of the Yamaha. Cal was interesting. He said, Cal's good friends with Dovi, they get on. But he said, look, he's going to have to completely change his philosophy because he's been used to trying to make the most of the power of the Ducati. Whereas with the Yamaha, you've got to make use of the corner speed. So it's going to be a complete switch in that sense of how to get the lap time. But I think Dovi, with all of his experience, and maybe from Yamaha's side, they're losing Rossi with about 1 million years of experience on the bike. That they've lost Vinales, he had 4.5 years on the bike. Maybe they think that, just bringing in somebody who's got experience, he's tested the Aprilia, he's raced the Honda, he's raced the Yamaha, he's raced the Ducati. He's got a lot of knowledge of the bikes, and maybe having him on one of those machines will be good for the whole project. So yeah, to answer the question, he'll be on the A-spec bike this season and the factory spec, I believe, next season.
So many things that you brought up there, Pete, that I've got to go and jump on. I mean, all of the stuff that you talk about, the quality of Dovizioso, the class of Dovizioso, absolutely agreed and written in stone. But all of that stuff's good for a test rider. When he comes back, the goalposts have all moved. Modern way of riding a motorbike. Michelin have changed slightly during the course of the last year. There's been lots of subtle changes. Not least, we've got a whole raft of new guys that are winning races. There was a time a year ago where you could predict who the two riders were that were going to go through from qualifying one. No more. You can't predict. There are, the rest of the field are all vying for those two places to get into qualifying two. And I think that the landscape has changed a little bit. And I think that Dovi is going to struggle with that. I mean, he's got a get out of jail free card with the fact that it's not the top line factory bike. So therefore he can make that transition back into racing. But he's got to get over himself, get over a new bike, get over the slightly different tyres, rush into the end of a season which he may or may not have been preparing for mentally, but it's here now, so he's got to do it. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting end of season. And Dovizioso, his age is against him as well. It's going to be, I wish Andrea Dovizioso, I think he's a class act and a super rider. And he should have won a world championship, should have won a world title, and he hasn't. Will he be the man for the future? I was going to say there's a few things that are against him on that one, so we'll wait and see if he shows his class.
And I think just adding to that, looking at Cal's results, 17th place is, and Cal said, look, it's just moved on. Cal's in test rider mode now. And exactly as Keith says, you're stepping in the middle of the season. I guess from Yamaha's point of view, they've lost Vinales. They're having to reshuffle. All of the rider contracts are up at the end of next year. So, this will bring them, they've got Dovi on board to the end of next year. And then it could be massive changes throughout the grid at the end of next year.
MotoGP never fails to enthrall, does it? Week in, week out. I say it every week, but it just doesn't. It's true. There's just enough time to give an update on how we lie in our very own championship standings in terms of predictions. And I did not fare very well because both of my podium picks got knocked out. They knocked each other out in the first lap, so that's fun. But I did get Quartararo, so that does give me an extra point. So I'm now on 2. Pete, you did well. You got 2 extra points because you had Rins and you had Quartararo in your team. So that you're now joint leading the way with Keith, 3 points each. So I'm last. So out of 3, I'm last, and you're both leading the way. So hope you're enjoying that. And we'll get the next lot of predictions next time out, because we have a weekend off, but we don't. We'll be back to preview Aragon in Spain, which starts on the 10th of September. We'll return with you the week before that to preview it all, and for lots more MotoGP chat as well, along with 2 and 3. But you can keep up to date with all the very latest as usual on crash.net. Any questions, you know the drill by now. Tweet, Facebook, YouTube us, Instagram, whatever. We'll track them down, and I'll ask them to the guys on the show. Please do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts as well, and we shall see you right back here next week as ever. Until then, bye-bye.